The economy will have to expand to almost 3 times the present level.
We have allocated 230 billion rand over the next 10 years to achieve the restructuring of the electricity sector.
Madam Speaker, I therefore table the following documents before this House.
It's felt like a never-ending story. But after 5 grueling months for the Government of National Unity, President Cyril Ramaphosa's coalition has finally passed a budget. It's a critical oil for his administration's engine to keep running. And now Treasury's brought new measures to ensure we don't take this long for next year's budget.
The thing is that the stumbling block was not the actual appropriations, and here is the rub, here lies the problem with the coalition government, is that the DA demanded that Cyril Ramaphosa fire Minister of Higher Education, Nobuhle Nkabani. Plus, they also wanted the Minister of Human Settlements, also they wanted her removed, Thembi Simelane. And that was their condition for supporting the appropriations budget, and we really did not know until Monday night, we did not know if we were going to have an appropriations bill or if Government of National Unity was going to hold or it was going to break up.
Specialist journalist Carol Paton and I break down and chronologically track the politically fraught budget process next.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast channels.
Stay tuned until the end of the show to hear your latest voice notes. If you'd like to comment on this episode, send us your voice notes to 072 562 3179. My name's Graham Robenheimer. Let's chat the budget right here on The Lead on News 24. Well, won't you look at that? Our main lawmakers have managed to get their act together and pass a budget after all. Well, it's only taken them 5 months, and you've given everyone in the News 24 business team extra grey hairs in the process. Well, our specialist journalist, writer at large, Carol Paton's been the budget queen throughout here and joins me now in our Cape Town studios. Carol, thank you so much for today. I really do appreciate it, and welcome back to The Lead.
Thank you.
Look, I thought it would be very important for us to go through a little bit of like a timeline, if you will, here, right? It feels like a lifetime ago. Do you remember when J.R. Ewing was shot and killed on Dallas? Do you remember that?
I do. I don't know who killed him, but I do remember he was shot.
This feels that long ago in terms of when the budget started. It was around February, right? When was the first iteration of the GNU's budget first put forward, Carol?
First iteration was on the 19th of February. We as journalists got to see it, but no one else did because before it could actually be, the embargo could be lifted and we could all see it, the minister withdrew it. So it failed before it even started. And
then I thought here around, it's March 12th, I just joined the News 24 team, Carol, and we started tracking the budget process together. I remember at that time we had already started speaking about a tale of 2 budgets, and then the finance minister, Enoch Godongwana, he proposed this 1 percentage point VAT to the mix. And already going into that, we had seen a tweet from DA leader John Steenhuisen. We are going to essentially reject this, is what he had said at that time. Going into that, did you think it was going to be, so fraught?
Well, it is typically where a GNU comes undone, where a coalition government comes undone. And you have to do a lot of groundwork. You can't just do business as usual and do it the way you've always done it before, which is what the big mistake was. So, yes, by that stage, it was becoming clear that this was going to be a very rocky.
And then the 13th of March comes around, and I'm going to actually quote you, Carol. This is what you said. Quote unquote, I think it's not a bad budget in the context of the absolute terrible mess we're in. who knew that was the budget was going to be its own terrible mess for a while. And here we had started to see the DA's rejection of the finance minister's proposed VAT increase, and SARS was also pushing at the time for its own increases in the budget. Remember that?
Yes, it wasn't a bad budget in the sense that the finance minister decided that it was time to spend a little bit of money, and it was necessary, it was essential. You were having health, education and health services really, really stretched and not going to be able to pay teachers, etc. So he did need to add money to the budget. What made it good was that he also added money for infrastructure spending. But because it included this VAT increase, the DA wouldn't endorse it. But through some kind of convoluted politicking process, the ANC did manage to get the fiscal framework through Parliament without the DA. But in the end, they couldn't actually fix the mess because the parties that supported it said, no, we've got to get rid of this VAT increase. But it was too late. It was already in the budget. So then they had to scrap the budget and do Budget 3.0.
Then April rolled around. We were getting more and more concerned as journalists. The DA had outright rejected the budget. The ANC was looking to other parties to possibly fill the void. We were even talking about, is this the end of the road for the government of national unity as we know it?
Exactly. And the DA were really driving a hard bargain. And I think they completely overplayed their hand because it almost broke the GNU. But in defense of the DA, what they were trying to do was, because the ANC had ignored them on so many issues, they were trying to pin the ANC down to a few more deliverables before they agreed to the budget. And this was what the big sticking point was. In the end, however, they managed and they did it.
Carol, April 30th, right? We're now talking about Budget 3.0.
Right.
These are all additions in the lead, by the way. So if you want to go and listen back, I mean, I won't blame you if you don't want to, because those things are now sort of history in the context of the budget itself, right? And now we needed sort of everyone's buy-in. Everybody had to come to the table. And then we got some relief that, VAT wasn't going to go ahead. The DA and the EFF's High Court case had sort of succeeded. Who knew that these two parties would be coming together in that joint court application? So it was whittled down, remember, to 0.5 percentage points in the first year, and then equating to 1% over 2 years. And then essentially we are now talking about crafting a whole new fiscal framework to be lodged before Parliament.
Right, exactly. So in the end, what happened was the DA went to court. It was very clear the minister did not have a case. He defended it, but it was very clear after the first sitting of the judges, it was not going to fly. And I think he was in Europe somewhere, or in America, where they were attending some meetings. And at sort of midnight, he kind of issued a statement saying, I've withdrawn the VAT increase and we're going back to square one.
Sure, who knew? Here around May 21st, sure, we're jumping many, many weeks here, but of course, a week is a long time in politics. And it's not a statement that we would have at that point seen the 2 months prior, the DA coming out and saying it's now, quote unquote, cautiously supporting the finance minister's budget. Now in version 3.0, we had talked about how PRASA was due for a spending cut, but that SARS was now finally under the auspices of Commissioner Edward Kisveti. He finally got it right, that he could get more money throughout the process. That was scrapped. But your concern was still elsewhere, and I think it's still valid today, is that we still got this huge debt burden after all, right?
Exactly. And the fact that the other thing that's a bit complicated but necessary to understand is that there's several pieces of legislation to the budget. So the first one is that fiscal framework that we were talking about, which had the tax increase in it and then finally didn't have it in it. And that was the one that took 3 efforts. Then the next 2 bills, the Division of Revenue Bill and the Appropriation Bill, those then had to be passed. And over each one of them, there was a major crisis between the DA and the ANC.
Right. And Parliament's put together, which it's supposed to do because it's supposed to educate all of us, how the process unfolds. So as you say, fiscal framework and revenue proposals comes first, then the division of revenue bill, which then speaks to how much national, provincial and local governments, what share of the pie they get. And then the appropriation bill, which we're about to get to, is the last sort of piece of that legislative puzzle, which talks to what each national department and thus program or project thus gets at the end of the day. We really sort of zoom in. And then finally, that appropriation bill got passed in the National Assembly this week, which is a massive hurdle to get over the line. What did that take politically, though, Carol?
The thing is that the stumbling block was not the actual appropriations. And here is the rub. Here lies the problem with the coalition government, is that the DA demanded that Cyril Ramaphosa fire Minister of Higher Education, Nobuhle Nkabani. Plus, they also wanted the Minister of Human Settlements, they wanted her removed, Thembi Simelane. But, and that was their condition for supporting the appropriations budget. And we really did not know until Monday night, we did not know if we were going to have an appropriations bill, and if the government of national unity was going to hold, or it was going to break up. And then on Monday, sort of 5 p.m., the president fired Minister Nkabani. So that was just the last gasp attempt, and the DA said, okay, fine, that's enough for them. We'll take it as a victory, and we'll vote for the bill.
Did you ever think in your mind's eye that, the President Cyril Ramaphosa would have axed Minister Nkabani over that very contentious CETA appointment process in which it's believed that ANC-connected individuals were put forward first?
Well, no one's been fired for such a thing before by an ANC president. Usually you get away with this sort of thing. So it was a bit of it was not dead certain that she was going to be fired by any means, and I don't think anyone really knew until Monday. When the National Working Committee of the ANC resolved, okay, we're going to do this, and nobody knew. So the whole country was just in a state of like, well, are we going to have a budget or aren't we? Are we going to have a GNU or aren't we? And so at the very last minute, huge relief. Elation, delight, and budget passed on Wednesday.
Now, what's quite interestingly is that National Treasury has come along, and of course this was bound to happen at one point, and it's positive. They've come and they said, right, there's a new host of technical guidelines that we need to put in place so that we don't fall foul into this same position again once we start talking about the main national budget next year, February, March, right, which seems just like around the corner. What are those particular measures? I think there are 3 in total that you've outlined in your latest piece on News 24, still trending. Godongwana announces big reforms after budget nightmare. Take us through those measures.
Well, the first thing is that, the budget used to be really quite a closely guarded secret. And even the macroeconomic projections, like how much growth will South Africa have, what does the Treasury think inflation will be, those sorts, what will the budget deficit be, those sorts of things, because they're market moving and they affect the currency and all of that, they have been a closely guarded secret, and everyone gets the budget released at the same time on the same day. And that's how it's worked. But now the Treasury is saying that, well, clearly this didn't work. We tried to do it the normal way. We sprang the surprise on, on Parliament and on the politicians, a couple of days before we were going to table the budget. And actually they rebelled. And so it didn't work. So now what they're going to do is they use the word socialize. By that, they just mean publicize. So they're going to engage with people. They're going to talk about their macroeconomic assumptions. They're going to talk about their plans. They're going to talk about their fiscal framework. They're going to talk about their revenue proposals. not just with the parties in the GNU, but with certain statutory bodies that they're supposed to consult, but actually never used to, and I guess the public in general. So it will no longer be a sort of closely guarded secret. People will be able to engage, and it's
That's
tricky.
good.
It's good and it's tricky because budgets are trade-offs, and what you want, I don't want, because I want what I want, and if you have what you have, I can't have what I want. So it's a tricky situation, but yeah, that's the new plan.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News 24 with Graham Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072 562 3179.
And then we'd seen sort of the first indication of this when we last spoke more than a month ago, which was TARS, the Targeted and Responsible Saving program that Treasury is now implementing in terms of finding where it can the stopgaps to basically relook at programs where they might feel that there's a lot of wasteful spending.
Exactly.
How can we stop that? How can we bring more money into the kitty, without, so plugging the holes in the bucket, basically.
Well, what's happened is that over time, the ANC government's been in power for 30 years. So over time, each budget, they basically just say, okay, well, we'll take last year's budget and then we'll add a bit more. So you now want to have this program, so we'll add that. So what kept happening is the budget kept growing and growing, and all the demands kept on growing and growing. But nobody went back and said, well, that program that you started 30 years ago, it's actually useless. It doesn't work. And it's run its course, and you should scrap it. And because ministers never want their budgets reduced, no one did it. There was no incentive to do it. And now with the Treasury saying you're going to have to do it. So if Treasury officials are going to sit down with each department, and they're going to go through all of the programs, and they're going to rank them. And then your programs that you rank like bottom, lowest priority, those ones are going to be in for the chop. So it's long overdue that this kind of re-evaluation and revisiting of decisions that were made 30 years ago, should they be revisited.
And I thought this was also super interesting is, say, for example, hypothetically, social development departments managers to get reviewed, and then they find to save 5,000 Rand, hypothetically. That doesn't mean that the 5,000 Rand stays with social development. That means that National Treasury says, hey, I found 5,000 Rand and I might want to give it to transport.
Exactly. So they're saying the savings are not necessarily yours. They might go down into, something into temporary. They want it to be spent on temporary kind of budget items like infrastructure, things that generate economic growth, or they want to use it to reduce debt. So all in all, it's a great step forward.
And then lastly, looking at the third intervention, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So the third intervention is they had already done some of these spending reviews since 2013. They've done over 200 of them. But they kind of just fell through the cracks because the Treasury went off and did them on their own, and the departments just didn't implement them. So now departments have been instructed, right, you will take those spending reviews. If you were a department where there was a spending review, let's say, over your foreign missions, the cost of diplomatic missions, and that was evaluated and found to be extremely expensive, sort of in a benchmarking exercise comparing, say, to other middle-income countries or something like that. You're going to have to look at how to reduce those costs. And I think the idea that you benchmark it against other similar countries is a really useful concept.
I laughed at myself. I guffawed that this is not the final hurdle legislatively, that the budget must still go to the National Council of Provinces on the 30th of July. Yes, everybody, it still has to be ratified one last time, does it not? But I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. I mean, our colleague Jan Gerbers called the NCOP in the past a retirement home. What do you think, Carol?
Well, yeah, and the thing about it is that it's the power of the NCOP is made up of the provinces, and we only really have one. Well, we have one opposition province, DA province, and then we have KZN, which is a coalition, and so it's generally the ANC dominates the NCOP without any problem. So that's pretty much no problem to pass any legislation that the ANC is in favour of through the NCOP.
The DA wanted Minister Nkabane's axing as a, hey, then we'll vote in terms of getting the appropriations bill, over the line. But I thought also interesting is that the MKP, Mkhonto weSizwe Party, is now being the official opposition, so to speak, within the National Assembly, brought votes on everything to try and stall and make the process even more irritating and frustrating. I mean, they're doing what they're supposed to do if you had to look at it on the face of it.
I don't know if being obstructive is what you're supposed to do as an opposition. I think they do some things that are useful, but this was not particularly useful because they said, well, we object to the whole budget. Not only do we object, but we insist that the whole National Assembly vote on it. So there are 42 votes in the budget, plus there's the actual appropriation bill. So they insisted on calling a division. So that was just really to irritate everyone and say, hello, we're here, we're NK, we're just underlining the point that we don't agree. So that was what they did. So they slowed it down. I think they started the proceedings yesterday at 10 a.m. and I think they finished at 10 p.m. So it was a long day for MPs, but don't worry, they were fed, had plenty of food to keep going. This is standard practice at Parliament. And,
at the CTICC nogals.
At the CTICC. And I think, it was a long night. They had to work for their not small salaries.
I'm actually quite surprised how many MPs smoke, because I saw many of them, because obviously the CTICC is right next door to the Media 24 building here in Cape Town on the foreshore, and I walked past because I have to get to my parking, and so coming past the house sitting, there's so many MPs, I'm just saying, having a smoke.
But let me tell you, don't forget that ministers have so many people who look after them, whose job it is to stand around in the street and wait for them to be finished, such as protectors, drivers.
Good point.
All sorts of staff, hangers on, and those are probably the people you saw outside smoking, because I think those kind of people have a lot of time. They have a lot of downtime. They've got to do something with it.
In other words, Carol just went, Graham, you are fake news. Meanwhile, political analyst Daniel Silk says this is just one of many GNU coalition crises in the offing. So it's the beginning, he claims, of many to come still. And that the DA is really the one that's wagging the GNU dog, and that the DA is the real winner following the passing of the appropriations bill. Do you agree with that political sentiment?
I think they did win in this instance, but they have not wagged the GNU. That, in general, that is for certain. The ANC has basically just steamrolled the GNU all over the poor wagging DA. So that is not the case. I do feel hopeful that this is a kind of a new era, that having gone through these growing pains and these very traumatic growing pains where everybody really stared into the abyss and saw what could happen, how easily this GNU could fall apart. I do think we're on to a now more mature wicket where both sides are talking about, let's actually just put some proper dispute resolution mechanisms in place so that this doesn't keep happening. So they're going to have lots of negotiations now to try and sort out this new dispute resolution mechanism. But I think it's a positive development.
The markets seem to like it all.
Well, the markets love the GNU. The markets love it. And
the current configuration of the GNU.
Yes, exactly. The current configuration of the GNU. The markets love it, and the public loves it. The public wants, and voters want, the GNU in its present composition to continue. So I think as much as the ANC and the DA really don't like one another, and they really, really don't, they're stuck with each other.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
For better or for worse.
For all of us listening, most important budget we've ever passed since 1994?
Not in terms of the fiscal or, fiscal policy implications or anything like that. Because we're still, as you said earlier, we're still in a real mess financially as a country. And, even though they're plotting a path out of that and saying we're going to get out of this debt, the fact of the matter is they have not yet succeeded in getting us out of this debt. So not so much from that point of view, but from a political point of view, a great moment actually for the country that somehow it managed to pull this off.
Okay. You're ultimately looking at all of this from afar and from within, and whilst on holiday and with your family, and you're very busy at the moment, Carol. We were talking off air and you were saying, I'm a little bit tired at the moment. What's your biggest takeaway from this entire process? It's been very interesting for me joining the News 24 team and watching how you guys work really long hours to ensure that we understand what's going on in South Africa.
I think the biggest takeaway is that there is now a realization amongst the political parties, and particularly within the ANC, that they're no longer majority party. Now, this has been true for a year, but it hadn't really sunk in. And I think this budget crisis really brought it home. And so the ANC has started to realize that, yes, maybe this means we do have to share power. And maybe this means we do have to do things differently. Which I think it's been in denial about accepting that fact. So that's the biggest takeaway, and they did it. They're now talking about handling things differently, and so it's positive.
How many out of 5 Kruger coins would you give the final iteration of the budget? 5 being the best amount of...
Sure. Now listen, the budget can't get any Kruger coins, because it's in such debt. The country's in such debt. When they get us out of debt, we can start talking about Kruger coins. But not for that. The politicians, I'll give them both a thank you, both sides, a thank you, all sides, a thank you. Thank you for doing this. You did manage to put your own interests aside. But yeah, no Kruger coins for the budget. Not yet.
That specialist journalist, writer at large, one of my favorite guests, as always, on the lead on News 24 is Carol Paton. She brings an air of excellence to the table in terms of all things news and business and analysis. Carol, thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Listen Up is News 24's sharp new podcast, where hosts Tim Cohen and Mark Barnes cut through the clutter with bold takes and unfiltered insight.
They're not fighting for the good of South Africa. And so this is degenerated into a series of tit-for-tat spats. How's that for a bit of poetry early in the morning?
Smart, punchy, and unapologetically real.
President Ramaphosa has explained why he did it, and the reason he did it was because he said that people weren't allowed to go to America, and then Andrew Whitfield did, and then there's a dispute about whether or not he asked.
Catch new episodes of Listen Up every Tuesday on News 24 or wherever you get your podcasts.
I know a lot about this. Not really.
Yeah,
But
there we go.
Here goes.
You could be the accused for a change. Yeah.
Looking for a smarter weekend scroll? The Weekender is your ultimate guide to bold stories, sharp opinion, and a fresh lens on life in Mzansi. From exclusive interviews and powerful essays to wine picks, playlists, and pop culture gems, it's your perfect weekend read all in one place, landing every Saturday on News 24.
Well, we've come to the end of yet another news week, can you believe it? And we've got your voice notes in response to yesterday's episode entitled, Are Intec Damlin Failing Their Students and Staff? And we spoke to senior education journalist Prega Govender. It's just been great to have Prega in studio. I love the wealth of knowledge that he brings to the table. And we asked, is Educor, which is the main sort of parent company of Damlin's Intec as well as City Varsity, and is Educor setting itself up for another deregistration by government, because there have been more complaints this time, specifically around Intech, from staff and students about poor teaching and administrative practices, lecturers being paid late, students not receiving the proper materials, etc. Let's have a listen to some of the voice notes you've sent in.
Hi, what is happening with Intech and Damelin colleges is totally unacceptable. I wonder why the management or the owners of this big company is doing this to innocent children of God and also the staff. Why they should employ people and then not getting paid? Why they take thousands of friends from their students and then at the end of the day they cannot graduate? Crime is at its 200% in South Africa. It doesn't matter whether it's black or white or what navy. It's totally unacceptable. This is Banks Kosi, Peter Marisburg.
I don't believe that there is any shortcomings for any of these students. The fact is that tertiary education is a choice. You want to go and study further, you need to pay to study further. I believe primary school, high school, if we can get compensation for that or get paid, the people get free education, fine. Tertiary is a choice you make in life. So you cannot now want to claim accommodation, food, spending money, whatever. I'm going way off extra things that should be paid. But no, tertiary education is a choice, not a must-have, like primary school and high school. Sorry, Graham, the only reason why I said get paid, reason being is I'm in Kroonstad, Free State, and just before the Easter weekend, there was burning of ties and striking because it wasn't near the end of the month, but these kids wanted their 2,800 Rand, and the only reason why I'm saying this is because my husband's in the police, and I said 2,800 Rand for what? They get given 2,800 Rand towards food and that sort of thing, stationery, and they wanted it a week prior or a couple of days prior to their payday for their 2,800 Rand, and they made raucous inside of this town. But now I just want to know, is they are studying tertiary, and why are they demanding this money? And wherever, I never ever knew that if you study tertiary, that you do get paid or get given money towards food and things like that. I'm a 92 baby. And when we studied, our parents had to pay for stationery, accommodation, everything. So it doesn't make sense to me. Okay, thanks, bye.
Well, if I just may add a comment, I mean, obviously we're living now through vastly different economic times than from, say, the early 90s. Things have only gotten more and more expensive. I paid for my own studies, but super, super difficult to do so. Had to work and study at the same time for most of my life. You become nearly burnt out almost every single time. For a lot of families in this country, NSFAS is the only route. And government, well, we know how corrupt things can be, needs to stop wasting all of our money and plugging it into areas where we can sort of secure the next generation of qualified individuals, so that we don't have to suckle with brain drain and et al. I can carry on. We're going to go to our last voice note now.
Good day, Graham. I saw this on the newsfeed, pop up on the newsfeed. How can we get a hold of Intech or anybody there for some assistance? Because I've paid for a 2-year course for my son. He's written 1-year exam, and then I paid for 2 exams for this year, which he hasn't written yet because they've just gone AWOL. I've been to the building in Century City, but it's vacant. There's nobody there. The signs are off the building, and I can't get all of them on the phone because their service numbers are unavailable. Accounts department also unavailable. So how can we resolve this, please? Because this is now money lost, and my son don't have no certificate, diploma, or nothing to show for it. Thank you.
Sure. I would say get in touch with our senior education journalist, Prega Governor, up in Jersey. He would be able to best assist in having the available contacts at hand. Very sorry that that's been your situation, of course, echoing all the other various complaints that we've heard and come across our education desk thus far. So sorry to hear about that, though. It's never nice just for money to go into an ether and not really get anything out of it. And I hope your case is sort of solved soon, but I'll definitely pass on those details to Prega. Thank you so much for all of your voice notes there. If you'd like to engage us on this particular episode's topics, if you've got any thoughts on the budget, what it might mean to you, and what you would like to see out of the process going ahead, get in touch on our official The Lead WhatsApp line. That number's 072 562 3179. So lucky to hear from you across the country. To be reminded of each episode, also hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels. Shoo, what a week it's been. I'm going to be, hopefully, putting on a lekker bride this weekend. My name's Graham Robenheimer. So long as there's news, we'll always have the budget. Yes, well, we have a budget now. We'll always have the lead. See you later.